in New York, where I live. Now, I love my friend like I love my sister. That man who betrayed her, who did awful things to her, will not have my goodwill. He can't. Because he took somebody that is really dear to me and was very evil with her. Assuming the opposite. She had a terrible accident and somebody helped her selflessly, really went out of this way to help her. And she calls me up and said, "You won't believe what this man, the stranger, did to me. He was so good to me." Now, if that man comes to New York, he will be immediately my friend. Translate that to God. God loves us more than we could possibly imagine. It is a different love. It's a radical love. It is an endless love. If I now go to one of our brothers and sisters and do them harm, I've actually harmed God, because he loves each and every one of us. If I now show mercy and goodness to one of my brothers and sisters, I've immediately been brought closer to God, because I've done something to a brother and sister that God loves. So each and every day I have a choice to do good or bad, and there's a consequence to it. When you refer to communism, to regimes of the past, to regimes of today, to what happens, the people that want to enslave you, the darkness, and the people that want to set you free. It's always been like this, it will always be like that. We have to fight it every day. We cannot solve the problems of this world, we can only solve them individually for us. So you have to stand up for what is right, and maybe have many obstacles and consequences against you, but that shows God on whose side you really are. And nothing happens in a vacuum. Everything is recorded. This universe cannot forget anything because it simply can't. We can forget things as human beings. We can lose things. This universe can't, because it's God's universe.
Somebody on the chat room asked about reincarnation. Is that possible? Does that happen? And personally, I've undergone a lot of questioning of myself. I've written novels and stories about a world 10,000 years in the past, and sometimes I don't know if I'm writing fiction or remembering.
For me, reincarnation is a fact, and let me tell you why. We have 5,000 different Christian denominations. People live and believe different things. Every one of them thinks they have the absolute right. The Word of God has been rewritten many times, and again, I as a Catholic have noticed that. One thing you cannot rewrite is God's laws. Gravity works. You cannot reinterpret it, gravity, because we can measure it. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim, if you believe in gravity, if you're Jew, if you don't believe it, if you're agnostic, atheist, if you come from I don't know where. Gravity is measurable. The laws of this universe are measurable. Once you understand the universal laws of polarity, of vibration, of circulation, everything circulates. There are no half circles in this universe. They simply do not exist. God's promise, Christ's promise, whatever you sow, you shall reap, would be broken. If you have a man who goes out, I don't know, rapes, kills, and then dies when he is 95 years old, unless he faces his crimes again, unless it's possible to face his crimes again. If we know one thing about the universe, and again, it's not open for reinterpretation, everything circulates. Your blood circulates. You breathe in, you breathe out. Time circulates, the earth circulates, everything circulates, everything. If you're born, you know one thing for sure, you will die. And the moment you die, you know one thing for sure, you will be born. It is the circle of life until we have been purified to enter the kingdom of God. I had these dreams which really took me to the other side, and they're in this book. And it's always these dreams where I sort of woke up and I saw these things as if it was a film in 3 dimensions, actually in 4 dimensions. And it showed me, one dream was, for instance, there was a valley, and I saw on one side the beautiful souls. They were absolutely beautiful. You fell in love with them. They didn't have to speak to you because you knew them. On the other side of the valley were the truly ugly souls. They were horrendous. Much more ugly than any Hollywood movie could produce. And then there were a long line of souls, billions and billions and billions, waiting to go through this large revolving door. And I saw them go through this revolving door, and the entry and the exit was instant. There was no time. They came in as they came out. Some of them became beautiful souls and immediately transcended to parity, to the other side, because now they were beautiful. Some of them got slightly better, and then they waited to go through that revolving door again. When I woke up, I realized that revolving door is our earth. Just like we go to school and we cannot graduate on the first day. Nobody learns a lesson within a moment, within a second, an hour, a day, or even a week or a month. We go to school quite often until we finally graduate. There is an end game, absolutely. But we don't graduate in first grade or second grade because what we face is so much greater than we could possibly imagine. Some of us can graduate right away. But most of us need a few more lessons to get there. That is by the grace of God. The grace of God is that we have this earth, that we are allowed to live in it, that Christ died for us and washed away our sins. That is the grace of God. But it's a much longer process than most of us imagine.
So, the idea of reincarnation fits right in with that. I mean, that's I was told once by psychic or a spiritual person that this would be my last incarnation.
Well, reincarnation, karma means flesh, and we either come once, and reincarnation means you are coming back into the flesh. All people who believe in a soul believe that the soul came into the flesh, into karma. Reincarnation means just that you've done it more than once. Now, what does this universe tell us? These are God's laws. Nothing comes once. The sun doesn't rise once, you don't breathe once, you don't eat once, you don't drink once, you don't love once. Everything is cyclical. Everything vibrates constantly. So reincarnation just means that we have the possibility of coming back more than once. Hopefully we don't have to. Some of us probably do. We don't learn that lesson right away. Some of us just blind ourselves off. That's why when you see a first grader, you're not sad because he hasn't graduated yet. Eventually he'll graduate. Eventually. It takes time for that first grader to learn his lesson and then to make it a second grade. But he has to leave first grade to go to second grade. And then after that second grade, he learned all the lessons second grade. He actually leaves second grade. The same thing with us. We leave one life because it's impossible to be in first and fifth grade at the same time. It would make no sense. So for us to come back, it's just a learning process. We're part of that cyclical movement. And it's the only way that Christ's promise, whatever you sow, you shall reap, will be fulfilled. Now, some people might agree with us, or some people might disagree with us. It's irrelevant. It's like disagreeing with gravity. The laws of this universe, which is God's blueprint, are absolute. The laws of polarity are absolute. You cannot have light without a plus and a minus. Add two pluses. It's not going to give light. You cannot breathe in and breathe in and breathe in without breathing out. You cannot have a day and a night, but the long day determines a short night. Everything is balanced. Everything in this universe is balanced. You will never have a fall without a spring falling. It doesn't happen that way. Everything is according to God's law, which is called cosmos. And that law is absolute. So just by looking at God's laws, by looking at this universe, we know there's no randomness, there's no chance. So chance is not the creative force. It is God's law that has created everything. And those laws are absolute, and they're not ready for interpretation because you cannot reinterpret the laws of gravity, for example.
Now, with your knowledge of these laws, how do we apply them? What can we do to avoid the mistakes of the past, the mistakes of the Soviet Union, the mistakes of North Korea, the mistakes of East Germany? And what about Germany right now? I mean, it's still a powerful force in the European Union, and but you had communism there in East Germany. West Germany, you had a little closer, I think, to our ideals here. How did that reunification happen? And what can we learn from it, and how can we make America better? How can we keep... It looks to me like we're going in this direction. They're poisoning our food, they're poisoning our air. Somebody's paying for all those jets to spray all those chemtrails. They spray us with aluminum. And, of course, they've dumped the aluminum byproduct called fluoride into our water. And the studies that I've been going over this last week are saying that this is the cause of Alzheimer's, dementia, and even a reduction in our intelligence level. Our IQs are going down, and our health is certainly going down. What can we do? I mean, to roll it back, I've said we need to kind of roll it back to what this country was before the Federal Reserve was set up. After our founding fathers, for at least 100 years there before the Civil War, we were an ideal country, an ideal society based on Christianity.
Well, let me give you an example. I remember I was a kid and I got up early in the morning, as all of us did, because Muhammad Ali was fighting. And there was one fight, I forgot which one it was, where he actually had the flu, but he still won. Now, if you drew the wrong conclusions, you would say he won because he had the flu. No, he won despite the flu. The flu weakened him. But he's such a great fight that he survived the flu and he could still win even though he had the flu. The same thing with socialism. You have two types of socialism. When socialism infects one of the Western European countries, they got sick each and every time, really sick. England in the 70s, under Boltzmann Gallahan, basically lost their entire industry. They lost their steel industry, their car industry, their automobile industry. They lost their freedom. The country was on the verge of becoming a third world country. It was then Margaret Thatcher came in, who freed England, broke the unions, and created England and the wealth and the prosperity for its people. Now, the wealthy people in England were rich before, they're going to be rich later, but who profited the most was the middle class, the working British people, because they again had jobs, and jobs only come from one place, and that's industry. Germany, in 2005, under the socialist Schröder, got very, very sick. On the cover of Time magazine was Schröder, the socialist, and it said the sick man of Europe. Angela Merkel got voted in, with the principles of Thatcher and Reagan, freed the German industry of the grip hold, of the death grip hold of socialism, which limits everything, destroys industries like a cancer, and recreated a powerful Germany that's now the only hope of Europe. It's so simple. If you have an engine, if you reduce the flow of fuel, it's going to get weaker. If you shut off the flow of fuel, it's going to shut down. If you increase that fuel supply, it's going to get stronger. Our industries are the same. If you set industry free, they will hire people. You cannot have an industry without people, and they have good-paying jobs. And we are free and wealthy. You never had a prosperous society that wasn't wealthy. The greatest country this earth has ever seen is America, where most people of all the world wanted to come to, including myself. The only reason I was raised in freedom is because of America. We all came to these shores to experience freedom and prosperity, which is being destroyed as we speak by socialists and communists. And we have a lot of socialists and communists in America. If you just read Armand Hammer, book that he wrote in the 1930s, we had a very strong communist movement then. It's always the fight between good and evil, the people that want to imprison you. We're going to believe we're for you. If that was true, how come there's never been a prosperous socialist society? It's always Cuba. And then all those people who live in communism would risk their lives of themselves and their families to escape the workers' paradise. And they have direct barbed wire and self-shooting devices to keep the masses imprisoned. If you want to know what to do about today's state, read history books as long as they're not rewritten by Common Core. Find out, educate yourself as Americans what communism and socialism is. That it is like water in a bathtub. Freedom goes out. If you pull that plug, it doesn't go out on the left side. Water goes out for everyone. Freedom goes out for everyone. If you're a liberal listening to this, don't think it only goes out to the side that maybe you don't like. Everybody loses their freedom. With it, it's prosperity. And it's very hard to bring that water back, to bring that water of freedom back. We had America as a beacon of hope in the last 100 years. All the wars of America, though, were wars of liberation, not of occupation. The wars of Europe were wars of occupation. It doesn't matter if it was France or England or Spain or Germany. America liberated countries, and they paid billions for their own liberation. There is no country like America historically. And if you don't like America, tell me which country is second. Is it Portugal or Denmark? Which country is it? Bulgaria? There is no other flag like the American flag that really promises freedom, and we're losing it as we speak. It is being attacked from all sides by liberals. Today they call socialists and communists progressives. In Europe we call the Green Party the watermelon party, outside green, inside a deep red. It always ended up really bad for the people.
The I've said that the greening of America. They want to give you the Obama's idea or the government's idea of greening America is to lease the top of that mountain to a Chinese firm so they could come in and build windmills, create electricity, pipe it down to the power plant so the power plant can sell it to you and charge you a little bit more for green energy. And I kind of favor cutting out the middlemen, taking your one square block here and putting solar on the roof of every home and putting a wind generator on the roof of every home and putting a garden in the backyard, grow food, not grass, and we become more self-sufficient, we become independent, we're using exactly what God gave us, as opposed to this government or government of the bankers, by the bankers, and for the bankers power cartel. We're really hooked into this. We could have electric cars and run the juice provide the juice for the batteries off of the wheels as they're turning. Why are we being limited from this? I mean, to me, this is getting back to God. This is getting back to nature, and this is getting back to self-sufficiency. But we're not seeing that happening right now.
Well, if you look at climate change, it's a big lie, and I'll tell you why. What's the opposite of climate change? Would be climate stability. Has there ever been climate stability? Of course not. Climate always changed. We had the ice ages all the way down to Sicily. We had one ice cap, and then it melted 10,000 years ago. Of course, there was no human intervention. We have 28 glaciers in Austria. I went to a glacier exhibit, and it showed that the glaciers have sized, doubled, shrank since the beginning of time. They want to tell us that it's us. Now, the scientists who signed all these declarations, over 90% are liberals and have an agenda. They need to control us. Socialism tried to control us over a system. The new green movement, climate change, global warming, tries to do it over the climate. Are you for climate? Of course. Are you for nature? Of course. So you got to be with us. So you got to give us empowerment that we can control your lives. Climate change is nonsense because climate stability never existed. The climate has always changed. There is not a shred of evidence that any kind of warming has appeared since 17 years. To the contrary, the Antarctic now grew by 60 million square miles, the ice in the Antarctic. Check it out, 60 million square miles. We had more of the Great Lakes freeze over since 30 years. But we're still talking about global warming. There is not a shred of evidence that this Earth is number one warming right now for 17 years.
We have a saying.
Years, none of it.
We have a saying about that in Texas, you know. If you don't like the weather, wait a minute.
Exactly. I remember my grandmother lived to be 96. She always told me there's one thing really reliable about the weather, that it's unreliable. Because we had snow in April and we had warm days in January since the beginning of time. That's how it is. But if you use it for political purposes, they come up with this nonsense of climate change, which doesn't exist. The word climate change by itself is an oxymoron because it's like saying the summer is warm and the sun is bright. Climate has always changed. 90% of these scientists are self-professed leftists or uber leftists. So they have a political agenda. Ask them which party they vote for. 90% of the survey after survey shows you that they have a political, very, very far left agenda, and that agenda is to control you. Because obviously a big house is bad, air conditioning is bad, all that is bad for you. It's all bad, so we need government control. So they're trying through the back door to come what they can't really sell to the American people through the front door. And they lie. Just like they lied about Obamacare, just like government lies, they lie about these statistics. They all lie. It's plain and simple. And some people are willing to swallow the Kool-Aid and just go down the road. I think and hope there are enough people out there that are willing to stand up. We only get a few more chances, 2014 and 2016. We lose our freedom so quickly. Historically, countries have lost their freedom, have fared terribly, miserably. Dictatorship was usually in the form, and that's what American. So we have abilities.
Now,
and we have both.
I think there's actually a lot of hope out there. In 6 states, they're building greenhouses on the roof of the supermarkets and growing non-GMO food, and you can so the vegetables that you buy in that supermarket were picked that day. We've got the U.S. Navy is now developing the technology that I've been saying that they should build for 20 years. They're opening some ports and bringing the water in and running the ships off the water and extracting the hydrogen from the water to power the ships across the ocean. We've really got a lot of things happening here, and one of the most positive things that I see, and I want to get your opinion on it, because you mentioned Portugal, and I believe Portugal just made all drugs legal. They took away, they abolished all the laws against victimless crimes in Portugal, as I read that, as I understand that. What's happened in Colorado, they have restored what was referred to by popular mechanics as our billion-dollar crop. They've restored hemp. They've legalized marijuana. You can now smoke a joint in Colorado without going to prison for 7 years. So I think we've made progress here. And my friend, I financed a man by the name of Jack Hara while he was writing Emperor Wears No Clothes, which is probably the Bible of the legalized marijuana crowd out there, deservedly. What Ayn Rand told us, if the government has no power over honest citizens, so they got to make criminals out of us. And that's what I see happening with our whole industrial project here. And if you want to really see what this prison industrial complex, whoa, what's that in your pocket, son? Whoa, you're going to be working for IBM for the next couple of years here. We're going to put you in prison, and but you can just spend your time working for IBM for 25 cents an hour. What about that? What do you think this is a positive sign? And of course, we're still being dumbed down and demoralized. We're still being dumbed down and demoralized. We're they're still trying to sell us on the whole idea that smoking pot's bad for you. But well, smoking pot, smoking marijuana. Totally aside from the fact that 10,000 products are made out of it. Our paper was made out of it. Encyclopedia Britannica was printed on hemp paper for 100 years. Outside of that, it's a real economic boost. Jack Harry used to tell me that hemp could save the world. Marijuana could save the world. And I lean towards that belief. And what's happened in Colorado is first time in 100 years, or at least 80 years, that we've been able to partake or grow that again. What about that? Am I just?
Let me put it on a broader scale.
Okay.
One of the worst and most evil persons is the universal bureaucrat. The universal bureaucrat, doesn't matter if he's in Germany, France, England, or America, sits in front of an empty desk with nothing to do and the whole day to do it. He doesn't invent anything. He doesn't bring anything forward that furthers the human race. He regulates. Now, we all know we need a certain amount of regulation. We need to know that on a street, you drive on the right side, the oncoming traffic drives on the left side, we need certain taxes, we need a military, we need a police force. But that's not enough for him. He wants to regulate. You know that in America about 10,000 laws are formed every day? on a federal as well as at a local level. And most of these laws are not good for us. They just are created by bureaucrats because basically we have enough laws on the books. But then this bureaucrat has no job. And that's the problem. He would now have to go down to a supermarket or to a gas station and find a real job. So what does he do? He creates more laws, more legislation, more restrictions, more, because otherwise he's out of a job. And now he also not only finds more laws, he also invites his brother, his friend, and this and that's how that bureaucracy grows, and more departments. And why do you think the richest counties are all around Washington, D.C.? Look it up. Because Washington, D.C. sucks up the money from us, and then they hand it out to their friends. So they regulate us to death. They tell us from morning to night what we're allowed to do, what we're not allowed to do. But these are not brilliant people. These are not smart people. These bureaucrats are usually the dumbest of the dumb. And they sit there, and with an amazing arrogance and with the belief that God knows best, they tell you what you can eat, what you can smoke, what you can drink, how your house is going to look like, what style, how much money you're allowed to keep. They want to regulate you completely, and if you let them, it will end up in disaster as it always has. It always ends up in Cuba, East Germany, and Bulgaria. It always does, by design. So when you talk about Colorado, when you talk about freedoms, I believe that people should live their lives as they wish in a free society. It was under these principles that America was formed. That's when America was wealthiest. It was the beacon of freedom. Everybody looked towards America. Now we're becoming socialized. We have communists in the White House. We have people that openly state, like Anita Dunn, handpicked by Obama. The two people she admires the most is Mao Zedong and Mother Teresa. She called a political philosopher. Mother Teresa was not a political philosopher. She was a nun in India, in Calcutta. And Mao Zedong was a mass murderer of 70 million people. He murdered 70 million people in the Great Leap Forward. He was called the Great Leap Forward in communism. But these are people handpicked by Obama who can make statements like that. You have open communists like Van Jones. Obama's parents were open communists, and so on and so on. These people will do to America what communism has always done to its victim, destroy it. And the wealthy people, because they have liquid assets, it's called liquid assets, because they're liquid, they'll take their money to the Bahamas or wherever they want to take it. It is the average man, woman, that will suffer greatly because they will lose everything.
How do we turn this around? The problem is, now I tried to do it in a number of ways. I started the Free American magazine. I was printing 10,000 copies every month there until my accident. I worked with a presidential candidate that wanted to take back our banking system in much the same way that Kennedy tried to do with Executive Order 11110. His name was Charles Collins, but you never heard of Charles Collins. Nobody in America knew who Charles Collins was, although he was the first Republican in 1996 to sign up for the presidential race. And Charles never appeared on camera. I traveled from Maine to California with him, and every time he got up to speak to tell people we could take back the Federal Reserve, we could restore constitutional money, every cameraman on stage cut their cameras off and pointed them at the ground. In California, up in Oakland, we got there early. I put up Collins for President signs all over there, beside Dole for President, beside Buchanan for President, besides all of the other signs. There was Charles Collins. By the time I got into the hall the next morning, there wasn't one in the hall. So voting isn't going to do us any good, because they only tell you the politicians that have sold out, that have accepted their money, the money for their campaigns under the conditions. They're the only ones that ever appear on television. Now, the internet is making a difference, and that's why I publish my magazine, do this radio show on the internet, because I've cut out the middlemen. I don't pay Hearst for the paper, for the magazine. I don't pay DuPont for the ink for the magazine. And I don't pay Rockefeller for the gasoline to deliver it. The internet is making a difference, and that's pretty apparent in Colorado right now. It's my goal to using Colorado and all the money that's being made, that's flowing back into that state from the legalization or decriminalization of marijuana, to use that as an example and try to get that same type of system started in every state, along with encouraging people to grow their own food and generate their own power.
You know, as long as we have a democracy, and don't take that for granted, because it is a rather new invention in America, and it has been suppressed, and it will be suppressed in America too. I mean, look at the voter ID laws. You cannot take a ferry. I tried to take a ferry across the Long Island Sound with my motorcycle last year. I can't get on a ferry without an ID. Obviously, you know, there's voter fraud, and they're going to try and change these votes and then eliminate them. But as long as we still have elections, you have to vote for the candidate that you think can win. He might not be the best candidate, and I would urge you, maybe not even vote for the best candidate if he can't win. Vote for the one that has the best chance to win an election and actually counter what might happen to America. Coming from that system, understanding what socialism is, understanding how devastating, how sadistic, how perverted, how insane it is, and always has been. Go study history books, educate yourself, and then go out and vote. Take anybody you can, because as long as you can still vote, we can turn this thing around. But we're going down a path, like many countries have gone down that path before. And that path is very, very, very difficult to reverse. So we have a couple of elections where we can make a difference. And if we don't win those, believe me, the other side, that virus, will act the way it is designed to act. And that will take your freedom and your prosperity completely. And if you speak up against it, they're going to come after you, as they always have. That's why read history books, educate yourself. Just find out what socialism and communism is. Speak to people like people who came from Cuba, from East Germany, from Bulgaria, from the Soviet Union, from North Korea. Speak to people that have lived under that system. And they'll tell you horror stories after horror stories after horror stories. This program isn't long enough that I can tell you what happened to family in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, under communism. And it's horrendous. And yet we have people who are not understanding what the system is about. We have people that are educating our children in American schools. They call it progressivism. It's a different code. The inside is exactly the same. Like I said, the Green Party in Europe is called the Watermelon Party. Outside green, inside a deep red. Because that's really what they are. They want to control you. That's what government bureaucrats do. They sit there every day on an empty desk and figure out how to create more laws. For our good, of course. It's only for our good. But it really is for the insane quest of power and control.
We might have in 2016, we might have one candidate who has a chance, and that would be Governor Jesse Ventura. He won his governorship as an independent, and he's considering a run for president. If he did do that, he might be able to overcome this media blockout that Charles Collins suffered. And if he was successful and if he was elected, he would be the first president since George Washington that wasn't under the control of the Republicans or the Democrats. And I refer to the whole Republican-Democrat political parties as two wings of the same bird, and that bird is a global vulture. It ain't no eagle.
I don't disagree with you. The only place where an election, though, makes a difference is if you have a candidate that can actually win. Otherwise, your vote is wasted. If I have a candidate that I 100% agree with, and I don't think there's such a candidate, but he has no chance of really winning, I would vote for the second or third best candidate who would stand for freedom.
Would that have to be because of the stranglehold the Republican and Democratic Party has? I don't think we got a chance of getting somebody that wants to change the system. We're electing bureaucrats that want to continue this whole global banking system.
I agree with you, but that's why I say you will not get the candidate that's 100% in agreement with your thoughts. Vote for the one that you think has the best chance of actually winning. And even if you only agree with him 50%, the other side is much worse. I consider myself a conservative with conservative principles, not a Republican. And you're absolutely right. There are some people in there that are absolute bureaucrats just as much. But I will vote for the candidate who actually has a chance of winning. Otherwise, the other side will win. Your vote will be wasted. Find a candidate that you can agree with somewhat, that you think might be better. Even if you have the perfect candidate, vote for the one that actually can win. Otherwise, your vote is wasted.
All right, Marius Forte. One other thing. We've got just about 2 minutes left. You wrote this book with Kevin Sorbo's wife. Now, Kevin Sorbo, wasn't that Hercules?
He had that was actually the largest series all over the world. It was Hercules for 7 series, and then he had Andromeda. And he's a conservative Christian. Obviously, he's an outcast in Hollywood. But as you can see by his last movie, and I urge you to see it, God's Not Dead, we do have a Christian majority in this country. And even though Hollywood hated this movie, and the critics, if you read the critics, they hated this movie, the people loved it. I went to see it with my entire family, with my wife and friends and children. And they loved the movie because it is a very uplifting, wonderful film. And for each ticket that you buy, you're actually paying back Hollywood's message of telling them not to see it. So God's Not Dead is still playing. It was more than successful. It had a huge following. It's also got a book out by the same name, God's Not Dead. I urge you to see the movie. It's a great film.
All right, I'd love to speak with Kevin sometime if you could arrange that in the future.
Of course.
And I've got a couple of movies that I want to make, and they would probably be controversial because, of course, I'm controversial. But you wrote this book, The Answer, Proof of God in Heaven. That's linked on my side. You wrote that with Kevin's wife. Is that right?
We wrote that book with Kevin's wife, Sam. She's a great writer. You can get the book, The Answer, Proof of God in Heaven, on Amazon.com or on BarnesandNoble.com.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. We're out of time. God bless you. Great show. Great show. Thank you.
Thank you very much.